I remember the room going silent, not out of respect, but out of cowardice, when my new CEO told me my era was over. 22 years of building the very system her company ran on, dismissed with a smile sharp enough to cut bone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't bargain. I simply walked out, letting her believe she'd won. But people like her never notice the quiet ones, not until the ground shifts under their feet. If you want the full story, stay with me and subscribe or comment so I know you're here for the truth. I knew something was wrong the moment Madison Keene stepped into the conference room, heels clicking like a countdown. She didn't look at me, just at the glossy folder in her hand, the one I had reviewed 100 times for system audits, but never imagined would be used against me. I'd spent 22 years building the routing security architecture that Stratamax Systems bragged about on every investor call. I'd been here back when the office was a converted textile warehouse with flickering lights and leaky AC, long before the branding consultants and glass-walled meeting rooms. But on that morning, to her, I wasn't a pillar or a veteran or a builder. I was overhead. "Let's get right to it," she said, sliding into her chair. "Not good morning. Not thanks for coming in. Just a clipped summary of my worth, distilled into performance metrics she didn't understand and buzzwords she memorized from a leadership podcast." I waited, hands folded, pretending my heartbeat wasn't crawling up my throat. But when she finally lifted her eyes, I saw it. That cold, dismissive certainty, the kind people wear when they believe they're untouchable. "Gracie," she said, rehearsed and slow, "your contributions have been solid. But Stratamax is moving into a new era. We need agility, fresh thinking, people who can adapt." She didn't know it, but she was reciting the same speech I'd heard her give two other senior women the month before, both pushed out under the banner of organizational modernization. She tapped the folder. "You've been here a long time, maybe too long." The words didn't sting, they sliced. My throat tightened, but I nodded once, letting the silence settle. She mistook that for compliance. They always do. Behind her, through the glass walls, I saw my team watching. People I'd mentored through ugly rollouts, server outages, failed integrations. People who had cried in my office when the workloads crushed them. Not one of them stepped forward. Not one opened the door. Cowardice spreads fast in corporate spaces. Madison continued, unaware she was narrating her own downfall. "With our next product expansion, we're phasing out legacy architecture," she said. "We need leaders who fit the new direction. And frankly, this isn't personal, it's strategy." Strategy, an interesting word to use on the woman who architected the system she was leaning on. She handed me the separation packet like it was a parking ticket. "HR will finalize everything. If you need time to gather your things, we can have someone assist." Assist, as if I needed help packing up the remnants of 2 decades she was wiping out with a single meeting. I closed the folder gently, placed it under my arm, and stood. No anger, no scene, no begging, no bargaining, just calm, controlled, the kind of calm that makes people uneasy because they can't read what comes next. As I walked past the glass, my team avoided eye contact. One person pretended to type. Another minimized a window just so they wouldn't have to see me walk out. The silence followed me down the hall like a shadow. HR pretended to smile, motioned to a chair I didn't take, repeated scripted condolences I didn't hear. I kept walking. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped inside without turning back. Madison believed she'd just optimized her workforce. She believed pushing out the woman who built her company's backbone made her bold, visionary, efficient. That's the thing about leaders like her. They focus so hard on upward momentum, they never think to look at the foundation beneath them. And that's where I lived, and that's what she had just kicked loose. I didn't drive home right away. I sat in my car with the engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel, letting the weight of 22 years press against my ribs. It wasn't grief, not shock either. It was something steadier, like the slow settling of dust after a building collapses. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the house felt different. Too quiet, like it knew before I did that something had shifted. My dog, Clover, padded over, nudging my leg with the gentle concern only a dog can manage. I scratched behind her ears, then walked to the kitchen. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, the kind I kept for nights when old memories came knocking. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't falling apart. My mind was too busy sorting through the past, searching for something I'd buried a long time ago. I opened the drawer where I kept old warranty papers, half-dead pens, and things I meant to throw away but never did. Underneath the clutter was a slim, worn manila envelope. No label, just the faint crease marks of being handled carefully a lifetime earlier. I held it for a moment, feeling the shift inside my chest, the way a puzzle piece clicks into place after years of being overlooked. I carried it to the kitchen table and sat down, Clover curled up at my feet as I opened the flap. Inside lay a provisional patent filing, my routing security protocol, the one I'd developed back when Stratamax was nothing more than a cramped office above a shipping warehouse. Back then, everything was chaos. No budget, no structure, no guarantees the company would survive its first year. I remembered staying late with takeout dinners balanced on server racks, running stress tests on machines that overheated if you looked at them wrong. I'd built the core architecture from scratch, not because anyone asked, but because someone had to. The founders were good people then, raw, scrappy, fighting to keep the lights on. And in those early years, during one particularly shaky quarter when layoffs and bankruptcy whispers hung like fog, I met Ava Torres. She wasn't my attorney yet, just a friend of a friend who specialized in IP law and didn't like seeing engineers get chewed up by unstable startups. We met at a coffee shop after a 16-hour emergency patch cycle. I'd shown her my notes, the framework I was building, and she'd leaned back with that thoughtful expression of someone doing silent math. "File it under your name," she'd said. "Temporarily. You can always assign it later once the company stabilizes." The company never stabilized. It grew. It expanded. It became shiny, glossy, corporate. But somewhere between funding rounds and leadership changes, the formal patent transfer was never completed. Every time I brought it up, legal said it was being processed or pending. It didn't matter. I was loyal. And stupidly, I believed loyalty meant something. That's what made sitting at my kitchen table now feel so sharp. Not betrayal. Realization. I took a slow sip of bourbon, reached for my laptop, and opened my email. My fingers hovered over the keys for a second. Then I began typing a message to Ava. Subject line, "Need verification." I scanned the provisional file, attached it, and sent it without ceremony. Then I leaned back, letting the quiet settle. The house was dim, Clover's breathing steady. It was only then, in the soft hum of my kitchen, that the truth hit me fully. Madison hadn't just fired me. She'd triggered something she didn't even know existed, and I wasn't sure Stratamax would survive what came next. I woke before sunrise, not because of anxiety, but because a part of me already knew the answer waiting in my inbox. The house was still, the sky barely tinted blue, and Clover stretched lazily as I reached for my phone. One new email. Ava had written back at 5:12 a.m. her time, which meant she'd probably opened my attachment half asleep and then snapped awake once she read the clause again. Her message was short, deliberate, and devastating, not to me, but to Stratamax. "Gracie, the reversion clause stands. Termination without cause triggers immediate transfer of full ownership back to you, effective the minute they let you go." I stared at the screen, letting each word settle into place. Not triumphant, not shocked, just awake, fully, sharply awake. I sat up straighter, the old instinct kicking in, the one forged from years of disaster recovery planning, server meltdowns, and crisis calls at 2 a.m. You learn not to panic. You assess. You act. Madison thought she'd erased me with the signature, but she'd only unlocked the door I'd quietly left behind. Padded into the kitchen, set my phone down, and opened my laptop. The login window greeted me like an old ally. My hands moved without hesitation, pulling up the USPTO portal, navigating through menus I hadn't looked at in a decade. But it was all there. My provisional filing, the technical abstracts, the assigned docket numbers. And there it was, highlighted in legal black and white. In the event of involuntary termination without cause, complete ownership of the described intellectual property shall revert to the inventor within 24 hours of formal notice. No ambiguity, no loophole, no corporate spin strong enough to soften that blow. I clicked through the reversion submission draft Ava had helped me prepare years ago, just in case. Back then, neither of us really believed I'd ever need it. I'd been the backbone of Stratamax's infrastructure, the person executives leaned on when presentations failed and systems buckled. I wasn't someone you fired. I was someone you retained out of survival. Or so I thought. As the form loaded, Clover nudged my leg, sensing the shift in my breathing, the focused calm rolling over me like a settling tide. "It's okay," I whispered, not sure if I meant to comfort her or myself, but it was okay. Because I wasn't powerless. My work wasn't lost. My legacy hadn't been erased. I filled in the digital fields one by one. Termination date, time, reversion justification, signature validation. It didn't feel dramatic. No cinematic music swelled. No sudden rush of adrenaline. It was quiet, precise, surgical. When I clicked Submit, the confirmation window popped up, a simple message acknowledging receipt. That was it. 22 years of innovation, long nights, and unseen labor, all returning to their rightful owner with a single keystroke. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. Across the city, Stratamax was probably gearing up for their big product showcase, the one Madison had proudly announced to investors. A multi-million-dollar logistics overhaul powered entirely by the routing security engine she believed belonged to them. But as of 6:43 a.m., it didn't. Clover rested her head on my knee, and I stroked her back, feeling the eerie stillness of the moment. Not revenge. Not yet. This was awareness. This was the understanding that a storm was already forming over Stratamax, and I didn't need to lift a finger to start it. It had already begun. By mid-morning, the world outside my window was bright and loud, but inside my house, everything felt eerily still, like the moment before a glass slips off the counter. I made coffee, fed Clover, and watched the minutes pass with the calm of someone who already knows exactly how the next several hours will unfold. Stratamax had no idea what was coming. My phone kept buzzing, LinkedIn messages, texts from coworkers who suddenly remembered my existence, people pretending they cared when what they really wanted was information. One message stood out from a junior engineer named Logan. "Hey, weird question. Did you take any of your old modules with you? We're doing final integration today and some dependencies are missing." "Missing," he said. They weren't missing. They had reverted. I didn't answer. I let him stew in the confusion. It wasn't cruelty. It was the simple truth that no one had spoken up for me yesterday, so I owed them nothing today. I opened my laptop again, not to check the patent status, but out of habit. Then out of curiosity, I searched Stratamax's internal announcements. Madison had posted a celebratory blurb at 7:15 a.m. "Big day ahead, final prep for our Logistics Nexus launch. So proud of our team." I almost laughed. She was parading confidence while standing on a trapdoor she didn't know existed. Around 9:30, my phone buzzed again. This time, a voicemail from a receptionist I'd known for years. Her voice was shaky. "Gracie, I think something's wrong. Legal has been running around since 8. They're looking for your old contracts. I don't know what's happening, but something's off." Something was more than off. Somewhere in that building, a low-level legal intern was probably clicking through routine patent monitoring reports the way they always did before major product reveals. And eventually, inevitably, they were going to see it. My name sitting where Stratamax's should have been, marked as the full and current owner of the routing security engine their entire launch depended on. Around noon, I got confirmation the discovery had happened. Not from the company, of course not, but from someone who still respected me. A paralegal named John sent a text so carefully worded it could have been framed. "FYI, certain documents have changed status. Leadership informed. Situation escalating." That was corporate speak for panic. I pictured the scene: the intern frozen in front of their screen, the supervising attorney leaning in, going pale, the sudden flurry of footsteps as legal scrambled to confirm what the USPTO had already stamped. And all the while, Madison was likely rehearsing her speech for the expo, blissfully unaware her empire had a hole blown straight through its hull. But panic spreads fast. By 1:00 p.m., the messages from inside the company shifted tone. Is this true? Did something happen with your patents? Are we still using your code? I ignored them. Let them feel the silence they gave me. Meanwhile, preparations for the expo continued like a parade marching straight into oncoming traffic. I'd heard the venue was decked out in Stratamax blue, with oversized screens looping dramatic footage of logistics hubs and automated routing diagrams. Every one of them built on technology they no longer owned. They were printing brochures, testing demo servers, polishing microphones, setting up press seating, and not one person in charge had the sense or humility to stop and ask the question that mattered. Do we still have the right to use her work? Around 2:17 p.m., my phone buzzed with one final message that told me everything I needed to know. CEO says it's a clerical error. We're moving forward. And that was when I knew the climax was no longer avoidable. Stratamax wasn't just heading toward disaster, they were sprinting, and Madison was leading the charge with a smile. I didn't plan on watching the expo live stream. I thought I'd spend the afternoon quietly, maybe take Clover for a long walk, let the chaos unfold on its own. But when my phone lit up with 3 messages in a row, "Turn on the stream now. You need to see this. It's happening." Curiosity pulled me in like gravity. I opened the link and there it was, the Stratamax Innovation Expo, staged in a renovated convention hall glowing with blues, silvers, and corporate optimism. A massive banner hung above the stage. Logistics Nexus launch, tomorrow begins today. If only they knew how wrong that was. The camera panned across the audience. Investors, supply chain executives, tech analysts, the type who wear lanyards like armor. They all sat waiting for Madison to unveil the system she claimed would revolutionize the industry. A system built on the architecture she fired me for creating. When she finally walked on stage, she wore that same polished smile she'd used in my termination meeting. Confident, hollow, blinded by her own reflection. "Good afternoon," she said, voice smooth and bright. "Today marks a turning point for Stratamax. We are unveiling our most advanced routing security platform yet, a proprietary system designed entirely in-house." I felt the first crack then, subtle but inevitable. Words matter, especially the wrong ones. Proprietary. In-house. Claims they no longer had the legal right to make. She continued with practiced ease, sweeping her arm toward the floor-to-ceiling screen as it lit up with the system interface. My interface, my routing logic, my compression mapping, my error-handling signatures they never even bothered to disguise. The audience leaned in, impressed. Cameras flashed. Madison moved gracefully across the stage, talking about optimization, breakthroughs, innovation, buzzwords strung together with the confidence of someone who had no idea the ground beneath her was dissolving. I watched her pause center stage, ready to cue the first live demonstration. She gestured toward the engineers stationed at the demo consoles. "Let's show you what makes our system unlike anything on the market." That was when a woman in a dark blazer stepped out from the side of the stage. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She moved with the steady inevitability of a courthouse clerk walking toward a defendant. The audience murmured. Madison's smile froze. The woman leaned in, whispering something directly into her ear. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the effect, instantly. Madison's expression cracked, confusion first, then disbelief, then a flicker of anger. She whispered back, but the woman calmly shook her head. The mic on Madison's lapel hadn't been muted properly. The next phrase slipped out into the speakers. "What do you mean we don't own it?" Gasps echoed through the hall. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages, but I couldn't look away. The woman, legal counsel clearly, spoke into her ear again, quieter this time. Whatever she said made Madison step back, like she'd been struck. Meanwhile, movement rippled through the audience. People checking their phones, pulling up documents, a row of investors whispering urgently. Then the camera cut to a Pentagon-looking, no, not Pentagon, private sector executive, clipboard in hand, holding printed papers. USPTO printouts, with my name at the top. The moderator on the floor approached the stage, holding another sheet. "We have just received confirmation," he announced, voice wavering, "that the routing security framework referenced in Stratamax's materials is currently owned by—" He paused, blinking hard. "Gracie Hale." The silence that followed wasn't silence at all. It was a living thing, sharp, electric, predatory. Madison tried to recover, stammering something about an administrative delay, but the audience was already shifting, standing, gathering their things. Investors walked out. Analysts typed furiously. A few stared at Madison with open accusation, as if she'd just driven their stock portfolios off a cliff. The legal counsel stepped forward again, speaking into her ear with the firmness of someone issuing a final warning. Madison's face drained of color. Then a voice near the front said what everyone was thinking. "Are you demoing technology you don't have rights to?" Madison didn't answer. Couldn't. The demo screens went dark, microphones cut. Stage staff rushed in like EMTs at a disaster scene, pulling cables, shutting down systems, ushering people toward the exit. The entire launch, months of hype, millions in prep, collapsed in less than 5 minutes, undone by a clause they never bothered to read and a woman they thought they could discard. I leaned back in my chair, Clover resting her head on my knee as the live stream cut to black. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't approached a single investor. I hadn't stepped inside that expo hall. All I'd done was reclaim what was mine. And somehow, that was enough to bring the entire company to its knees. When I woke the next morning, the house was quiet, but my phone was vibrating so violently on the nightstand that Clover lifted her head with a low groan. The screen was a wall of notifications, missed calls, frantic texts, LinkedIn messages, voicemails stacked so deep I couldn't scroll fast enough to reach the bottom. 203 missed calls from the company that had walked me out the door less than 48 hours. Earlier, I didn't answer any of them, not yet. I slid out of bed, brewed coffee, and let Clover out into the backyard while my phone continued buzzing like a trapped hornet. When I finally checked the most recent voicemail, I recognized the voice immediately. Eleanor Rourke, the company's founder. She hadn't been involved in operations for years, choosing to step back when investors began treating her like an outdated relic. But she wasn't someone you dismissed. Even now, her voice carried the authority of someone used to commanding a room. "Gracie, we need to speak. Call me as soon as you can." No anger, no accusations, just urgency. And beneath that, something I never expected to hear in her voice. Fear. I set the phone down and took my time eating breakfast, letting the morning sunlight warm the kitchen tile while the coffee cleared my thoughts. When I finally hit call back, Eleanor picked up on the first ring. "Gracie," she said, voice sharp, "what do you want?" Not, "Can we fix this?" Not, "Let's talk about the misunderstanding." She already knew those doors were shut. She'd spent the night digging through old contracts, investor agreements, and archived emails, tracing every step that led to the disaster at the expo, and she knew exactly who had caused it. "I assume," I said, stirring my coffee slowly, "you've reviewed the patent." "Reviewed it?" she snapped. "It's all anyone is talking about." I listened, letting her anger burn itself out. She wasn't angry at me. She was furious at everyone who had let something so catastrophic slip through the cracks. Finally, when her breathing steadied, I answered the question she'd asked me the moment she picked up. "I'll send you my terms," I said. No emotion, no flourish, just business. A long silence stretched across the line before she replied. "Send them." I opened my laptop, cracked my knuckles, and created a new document. I didn't soften a single item. I didn't negotiate with myself, and I didn't apologize. My terms were simple, clear, and final. $9 million upfront licensing fee, 10% ongoing royalties for all future implementations, a permanent board seat with voting power. full public acknowledgement of my authorship, and immediate removal of Madison Keene as CEO. I read the list twice, ensuring there was no ambiguity, no loose thread for anyone to tug at later. Then I sent it with a single sentence beneath my signature. This is not revenge, this is correction. Minutes later, Eleanor responded with 3 words: "We accept, all." I leaned back in my chair as Clover nudged my leg, her warm weight grounding me in the calm after the storm. Somewhere across the city, the same executives who watched me walk out in silence were now scrambling to accommodate every demand I'd made. And the woman who believed she could modernize the company by erasing me was likely packing her office into cardboard boxes. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed, steady and unbroken. For the first time in 22 years, the power was exactly where it belonged. With me. The next morning, I walked through the revolving doors of Stratamax with a calm so steady, it almost felt like silence had wrapped itself around me. People stared, not with pity this time, but with the brittle shock of those who suddenly realized they backed the wrong side. A few tried to smile, others looked away. None of it mattered. I wasn't here for them. I headed toward the executive floor, Clover's fur still clinging to my coat from our early walk. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was entering a battlefield. I felt like I was entering what was mine. Eleanor met me outside the boardroom. Her expression was unreadable, but she stepped aside without hesitation, gesturing me in. My seat was there, my nameplate freshly printed, positioned right beside hers, as if it had been waiting for me all along. I sat, folded my hands, and let the room settle. The board members avoided my gaze, shuffling papers, clearing throats. They all knew exactly what had happened. They also knew they no longer had the luxury of pretending I was replaceable. When the meeting began, I spoke only once. "Let's move forward," I said. Simple, clean. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't vengeance. It was a reminder, a recalibration, a correction. Afterward, as I walked out of the building, sunlight spilling across the pavement, I finally allowed myself a slow breath. 22 years of work reclaimed. My voice restored, my power recognized. Some call it revenge. I call it balance returning to the system I built. I learned something I never expected while walking through the fire of this experience. Sometimes losing the place you gave your whole heart to is exactly what frees you to reclaim who you were always meant to be. I spent years believing loyalty would protect me, that commitment would be rewarded, that being the steady one, the one who never complained, never demanded credit, was the safest way to survive corporate life. But silence is a double-edged blade. It keeps the peace, yes, but it also lets people rewrite your worth right in front of you. What happened to me wasn't just about being fired. It was about realizing the walls I helped build were starting to close in, and the only way out was to stop waiting for someone to choose me and choose myself instead. That's the part no one tells you. Courage isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's the steady breath you take before you step away from what's familiar but no longer right. It's letting go of the idea that you owe your life to a place or a title. And it's accepting that accountability doesn't always look like shouting the truth from rooftops. Sometimes it's simply refusing to carry other people's mistakes on your back. In my case, the truth surfaced on its own. The people who tried to erase me ended up tripping over the very thing they ignored. And the revenge I got wasn't about hurting them. It was about stepping into a life where I didn't have to shrink. How to get started today. Write down one thing you've been tolerating for too long. Tell yourself the truth about why you're still tolerating it. Take one small step. Send an email, update your resume, set a boundary. Remind yourself, courage is a muscle. Use it. If this message resonates, drop a comment, share the story with someone who needs it, and subscribe so we can walk through these lessons together.